Hello and welcome to episode 27 of Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast. With me today is the host of the Bowel Chronicles podcast, Nicky Kilpatrick. Welcome, Nicky.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me here.
Well, thank you for having me as well, because my show on your podcast will come out before this, so we are recording slightly in sync. So I will be appearing on Nicky's podcast, the Bowel Chronicles, before you hear Nicky's episode on my podcast. So thank you very much for joining me. Now you're here to talk about your story, and that you've shared quite a lot on TikTok, you shared on Instagram. And I'd like to start, if I may, with sort of around 2015, when you're diagnosed with an extra large bowel. So something that I hadn't heard of, and I know we were talking offline before, and you know another person who has this, but something I hadn't heard of before. How did that kind of come about?
Okay, so I had a diagnosis of a megacolon. My kind of overall problem with my bowel is slow colon transit, which then has ended up in a stoma surgery. Back in 2015, I was going about my everyday business. I was actually preparing for a girly holiday and had been trying on some clothes in the bedroom, felt really good about myself because I'm always into fitness, had been working hard for this holiday and thought, flip me, I look good today. And less than 24 hours later, I was in hospital. My abdomen had swollen away out like a football. Basically, I'd swallowed a football, and I had been out for a meal that evening, and unbeknown to me, I had picked up some type of bacteria infection from the food premises, and it put me in hospital for 2 weeks. But it flagged up that nothing could push through my bowel. There was a buildup in my bowel, there was an obstruction in my bowel, and they could see that on the x-rays and scans that I basically they called my husband out and said, you need to come and see this. And I thought at that stage they're going to come back and tell me I've got a cancerous mass or a tumor, in there. There's something going on that's not good. And when he came back in, he basically put his hand to his throat and his hand to his below his belly button and said, you're backed up from here to here. And I said, what? And he said, yes, you are completely full of stool, of waste. And they admitted me to hospital at that point to administer enemas and various other bowel preparations. And when I drank those bowel preps and had those enemas, absolutely nothing happened. And they were kind of wanting to flush me out to get me in for a colonoscopy to see if there was anything else going in there because I was so heavily impacted. So I was in hospital for 2 weeks and then they sent me home. I went home for a few days. The pain continued. I was readmitted back to hospital again to manage the pain. And then they still couldn't do the colonoscopy. So they brought me back a few weeks later after being on constant bowel prep every single day to be able to do this colonoscopy. 3 weeks later, they brought me in, had the colonoscopy, drank all the bowel prep the night before, and I can remember them saying to me on the day, "Oh my goodness, that bowel prep, the residue is still in your bowel. You know, like we don't really see this." But they managed to do the colonoscopy. It was grand, and the next thing I was going to the pain clinic to have a lidocaine infusion because the amount of pain in my abdomen was so much. So I went in and I was kind of hooked up for the hour to have this infusion in to kind of manage the pain. And when they were trying to gauge the level of lidocaine in relation to my weight and things, the consultant started to look at my notes, and his reaction to me was, "Oh, you're the girl with the megacolon." And I just said, "I beg your pardon, what?" And he said, "You're the girl with the megacolon." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Oh, your colonoscopy. Like, have you not heard the results?" And I said, "No, I don't know the outcome." And he said, "Oh, well, basically, instead of you having around 4 feet of large intestine, you've got over 10 feet. You have an awful lot, and that is why you're obstructed, basically." from your throat to your bottom. That's that because you can hold a lot in there. And I kind of started to do the maths because I wouldn't generally swell out or have a large stomach. I could eat food and I could go for a very long time before I would swell out, and that was because of the length of the large bowel and the kind of tubing, the ascending colon, transverse colon, and descending colon, where instead of going up three sides, up the right hand side, across the top, and down the left hand side, they were all looping on top of each other, and that was why the stool couldn't pass through. So that's kind of where things really started kicking off in 2015. Although after that, my bowel movements went back to being every 2 to 3 weeks, which for me was normal. We know that technically isn't normal,
No.
and your bowel should be moving every day or every other day at least. But that was my standard normal. And previous to that, I'd had a couple of times in my lifetime where I had maybe been constipated for a while, but a simple laxative would rectify it. Um, the only other time before that that it was so bad was when I was 21. My bowel stopped functioning after I had the birth of my first child, and it didn't function for 10 weeks. And at that stage, they had told me that my large bowel and small bowel hadn't came back down after the pregnancy to kind of be together, that's why it was taken forever. But that was actually not the reason. It was because I had a megacolon and they just didn't know.
Yeah. No, I sort of, yeah, thought when you said if they hadn't come back together,
Mhm.
would have probably been because of the large colon and the fact that it was just taken, was it just taking time to come back together, or was it just not coming back together at all?
I think it probably had been stretched out to, a certain degree. I couldn't, here I had this 10-week-old baby and I couldn't set her on my abdomen, and cradle her because the pain was so severe. Um, but when I look back on it and say, okay, megacolon, and you've got so much, if you think of someone with a really small frame, and if I was to stand side by side with my husband now, who's quite a large man and broad, I effectively have more bile inside of me than what he does, and it just doesn't. It doesn't appear right. It doesn't equate to me. Or why would I have so much more than he does. So it takes a lot longer for everything to kind of go through the body. And then as
So
time's gone on, it's just gotten a lot worse. Yeah.
so was this obviously something you were born with? Was it, so it was picked up around 20, did you say 21, give or take, probably slightly later than that. So there was nothing sort of childhood and teens or anything that was sort of pointed to having an extra large colon?
Only in the last kind of 7 years, I've had access to my medical notes to have a look through. And I could see that whenever I was 15 or 16, I'd gone to the doctor, and they had said at that stage, oh, some constipation, and I was prescribed the likes of Laxato or Movicol, which is a sachet of powder to pop into water to drink, or just take standard lactulose, a spoonful of that, and I would have been okay. So just that, maybe I was 15 or 16 at the time, and then 21 when I had my first baby, and then I was grand, And like I said, it became normal for me, to maybe go to the toilet every couple of weeks. It was standard. It was what I was used to, and there was no one at that stage in my family who had, a bowel condition as such. My mum does have a tortuous bowel, but again, that's only came to light in the last couple of years. And since that, my youngest daughter also has a very long and tortuous bowel. So we do think, yes, it's been hereditary. And also then IBD runs in my family, which came to light, and my nan ended up with a stoma bag and things. So there is bowel issues in our family. Um, but again, that's all been in latter years.
Wow, that's interesting. Very, very interesting that that it then through your diagnosis that then you're able to see whether it's hereditary and what other people have and things like that? Because it's similar sort of thing with Hirschsprung's. I know we discussed yesterday on the parents having certain chromosomes, and if they have those certain chromosomes, it then ends up a 1 in 4 chance that your child could end up with Hirschsprung. So it's very interesting to know that there are other bowel conditions that are um, equally as hereditary. Um,
Well,
and
you
then I'd,
see, sorry, on my notes, my gran has IBS, diagnosed IBS. My mum was diagnosed with IBS, and my first diagnosis was IBS-C, which is IBS with constipation, slightly more severe. But I always knew there was something more going on. Like, this isn't IBS. It
no,
is. It is more. Yeah. Yeah.
wow, that's no, that's very yeah, very interesting to know. And then if I may, I'd like to move on to sort of 2020 ish. So when your bowel stopped just altogether, um, was that just a sort of sudden thing that happened, or had that been sort of building for a number of sort of months and years?
No, life was going kind of grand. Everything was okay. My bowel movements were standard, usually every 2 weeks. October 2020 was the last time ever that my bowel has functioned itself. I was out for a walk. At that point, we were just going through lockdown, and I had been walking 13 kilometers. I know it's a weird number, but it's just the route that I took every day was 13 kilometers with my dog. And like I said, I was feeling healthy. And at that stage, my bowel was working every day. I came back from my walk and my bowel worked. And I thought, this is great. And then the middle of October, I had been out for a walk. I was actually preparing to do a charity walk in the Mourne Mountains. And I took a massive pain in my lower left side, just above my hip bone. And I thought, oh, this doesn't feel right. It was really, really sharp pain. And I actually had had kidney stones 2 years before this, where I had some stents inserted to have the kidney stones removed. And the pain was the only thing I could liken it to. An absolutely horrendous pain. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And I thought, right, this has to be a kidney stone. And I kind of let it go. But over the next kind of couple of weeks, it got so bad I couldn't sleep. I was an insomniac. I was in sitting on my sofa all night long. I couldn't be in the bed. I was like, I'm keeping my husband awake. I was crying. I was in excruciating pain. Eventually took myself to the hospital, and they done some CT scans to rule out kidney stones, because you get red flagged if you already are someone who suffered previous kidney stones that got lodged. And they came out and they said to me, "No, there's no stones that are lodged anywhere. It all looks good." And I was like, "There has to be. This is horrendous. This is just not okay." And I knew it kind of wasn't anything from a female gynae point of view, because I'd had a subtotal hysterectomy years ago. So I was like, it's not that. It has to be kidney stones. And I hadn't, because my bowels were moving like normally every 2 weeks, I hadn't realized at that exact point that my bowels had stopped functioning. So this period of time kind of went on. We got to kind of November. The pain was exactly the same. I was sleeping every night on the sofa. I couldn't take heavy pain meds like codeine and things, because I would never have had codeine, because it constipates you. So those are things that I would stay away from. So I took myself again back to the hospital, and what they did was they put me on a Voltarol suppository that goes into the back passage to kind of lessen the pain in that area. So it's a bit more effective. And it was the same medication they put me on for kidney stones. It took the edge off it slightly. It was supposed to last for 12 hours, and then I was screaming. And this kind of went on. We got as far as Christmas. And I can remember on Christmas Day 2020 sitting at the table, and I actually had to dish up myself a child's portion of Christmas dinner. And I couldn't eat it, because anything that I put into my body, I felt completely full. I just was like, I'm going to be sick. I feel like I'm going to vomit. And then from Christmas Day into New Year's, going into New Year's, I realised I needed to take some form of laxative or bowel prep that was stronger because I had been drinking 14 sachets of Laxido in a jug at this stage, made up in 2 litres of water. It wasn't penetrating anything, nothing could get away. And so I moved on to a more harsh type of bowel prep at that point. And again, nothing happened. I between then and the start of February, when I took myself to see a private consultant because I'd again been to A&E department. They had sent me home 2 more times, and my husband was just losing the will to live. He said, "There's something wrong with you." And actually, what was happening was I was getting out of bed in the morning, and I could feel my body disappearing. I just every morning I got up, I was like, "I've lost more weight," and family members were saying to me, "There's something not right. Like there's something not right." And the weight was just dropping off me. So in the space of 6 weeks, 3 stone just dropped. And I then booked this private appointment to see a consultant, a gastroenterologist. And I went to see him. That appointment didn't even last 5 minutes. And he said, "You need a CT scan." And I said, "I've had a CT scan done, but it's of my kidneys. And my kidneys are okay." And he said, "No, you need a CT scan done of your bowel. I can't, chat or diagnose or do anything until you've had this CT scan." So he said, "Look, we'll talk after you've had that CT scan done." So I left his room. I went and made the appointment, which was not for another 2 weeks. And he said, "Look, if the pain increases in this time before I see you again, take yourself back to the hospital because this pain needs managed." I see him on the Thursday, and by the Tuesday, I was admitted to hospital because, again, the pain was so intense. And they were actually going to send me home that evening with more pain medication. Only I said to them, "Are you not even going to x ray me?" And he said, "Okay, I'll x ray you." And I had actually rang my husband to say, "Can you drive back down? We live less than 5 minutes away from the hospital. Can you come back down and pick me up? I'm almost ready to go. I'm just waiting on pain relief." And when I was being x-rayed, I said to the radiographer, he actually said to me, "Oh, you're having a lot of problems on the left-hand side with your bowel, are you?" And I said, "Yes." "Can you see that?" And he said, "Yeah." And I asked him, I said, "Can you call up the x-ray from last week?" And he put the two x-rays side by side on the screen. And the first x-ray from the week before, my colon, your colon effectively looks like a length of Hoover tubing, the way I describe it. There were some lumps and bumps the whole way through this tubing. However, on the present x-ray that night, you couldn't see any tubes of my bowel. It just looked like a massive balloon inflated on the screen. And he looked at me and raised his eyebrows, and I said, "I've seen enough, that's okay." So I came out, and I was quite cocky when I seen the doctor that night because he kept telling me, "We don't have a surgeon free to come and speak to you. We don't have a surgeon free." But the moment I walked back to the waiting area, there were several doctors, and I could see a guy sitting in scrubs, and it was plain that he was a surgeon. He was just out of theatre. And I said to the doctor, "I've seen the x-ray, like the x-ray's not good." And he said, "Okay, I'll take a look, I'll take a look." So I sat on the seat behind where he was stood, and I watched him walk to the surgeon, tapped him on the shoulder, and he said, "Can you come with me? Can you take a look at this for me?" And they stood looking at my x-rays, and his words were, "A large bowel obstruction. She needs an urgent CT with contrast now." And he lifted the phone and he dialed through to the CT room and said, "Can you unlock immediately? I need contrast set up. I'm bringing this patient now myself." And he put me into a chair and he took me himself to have that CT scan done. I had the CT scan done and I never seen that doctor afterwards. The surgeon came and spoke with me and said, "Yes, you do have a massive obstruction, but this is not a physical obstruction. I'm happy to tell you, you don't have a mass, you don't have a tumour, but you do have some type of mechanical obstruction. And it's not a reason for me to admit you to hospital. The reason for me to admit you to hospital is to manage your pain right now." And so
Wow.
I had another 2 weeks in hospital. of constant bowel prep, drinking it, constant enemas and suppositories. They would bring the commode to the side of the bed. And in my head, I was wishing I could use the commode and my bowels would move, but nothing actually happened. And so they were filling me up with all of this stuff for the 2 weeks that I was there, and I was getting nowhere. I was getting thinner. I was losing a lot of weight, but I didn't get anywhere. And they discharged me back into the care of the private consultant. And of course, by this stage, we were into March 21, which was, I think, the third and final lockdown. And it was just a nightmare. That became a nightmare to get hold of him. I didn't see him face to face. Everything was a telephone appointment. And I was just kind of discharged to take all of this bowel prep in the hope that it would work. But nothing was actually happening. And so I had gotten to the stage where I couldn't eat. I hadn't been able to eat from Christmas, from having a Christmas dinner. And I was now onto this diet of having 3 spoonfuls of soup in an evening and 1 cracker with butter. And then it got to the end of March when I got out of hospital. I couldn't have the soup, I couldn't have the cracker, and I was then struggling with having a mouthful of water.
Wow. Wow, that's an incredible story, and I think there's one point that I kind of took from that, and I saw it with somebody else actually yesterday, that you know your body at the end of the day,
Mhm,
and that yes, doctors, nurses do fantastic work, fantastic jobs, but at the end of the day, if you know something isn't right,
mhm.
then fight for it, and I
Yeah.
think that's definitely what you did. And if you get a sense that actually, this particular medication or this procedure or whatever, it doesn't feel good to me, you know voice up and say, look, actually, what are the other options?
Yeah.
Which is definitely something you did, and definitely paid dividends in the end, would you say?
Yes, I mean, it was a struggle that whenever I was discharged that time out of hospital into the care of that consultant, it's fair to say that consultant actually got me nowhere. The one favor he did do, because he kept saying, you're a really complex case. Like he had no expertise of someone with a megacolon who couldn't eat, who couldn't pass anything with bowel prep. It just wasn't normal. And I I was breaking my heart because here I was at home, the weight disappearing off me. I couldn't leave the house. I was in excruciating pain all of the time, and they were trying to then give me like morphine and things. And I was like, these are all things that constipate and make things worse. They numb the bowel. They're not good for the bowel, and to be on laxatives for any more than 5 days, it just isn't normal. Let alone every day in life. So at that stage, he referred me to Coloplast to have a bowel irrigation machine, and he also referred me to a clinical psychologist. He didn't inform me that he was doing a referral, and I'm someone who always has a positive kind of outlook on life, no matter how crappy the circumstances are. And I got angry whenever the appointment came through the door. I thought, who has referred me to a clinical psychologist? I'm not losing the plot. I know there's something not right in my body. He doesn't know how to diagnose it. He doesn't know how to treat it. That's kind of not my issue. And instead of staying negative, I chose to flip it the other way and say, right, okay, I'm going to see what I can get out of this appointment. And the very first online appointment that I had with the psychiatrist, he basically had very little information, and he said, like, tell me what's been going on with you, because I've just got this referral. You've got slow colon transit, and how am I best going to help you come to terms with your diagnosis? That's what he had. And when I explained to him what had happened, we I couldn't get out of bed at night and go to the bathroom without collapsing on the floor. I couldn't bend down to pick something up off the floor without collapsing because I was so malnourished. I didn't have the right vitamins, minerals, micronutrients, all of that in my body, and my body couldn't cope. So I would just keel over. And he said to me, you're malnourished. You've been neglected. You're not getting the medical treatment you need. He's not doing his job. Like, why have you not seen a dietitian and nutritionist? And I said, I don't know. So he taught me there and then. He said, I'm going to teach you to advocate for yourself because you know, throughout your whole life, your parents probably done that for you, and your husband has done this for you. But we're at the stage where we're kind of in lockdown and things have changed, and you're the person that really has to speak up for yourself. I said, you're right. I would do this for my kids. Like I would fight this, and I have to fight this for me because this is impacting not just me; it's impacting my whole family. And I couldn't, I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't just decide to take the dog out for a walk because I was on bowel prep every day. And when bowel prep did kick in to a certain extent, it would be 36 hours after having the treatment. And I wouldn't get a sensation of you're going to pass some liquid. I got a burning sensation in my bottom and I had to be on the toilet there and then. So it was coming to terms with things like if you're going to be in the car, I have to sit on a towel because the reality is I might soil myself and I have to be okay with that if I want to leave the house. Um, I couldn't go out socially, I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink. People stopped inviting you because they knew I couldn't eat or drink. And eventually I got the support from the dietitian. I was moved across to a liquid only diet, which was liquid powder shakes 2 and 3 times a day. I struggled even with those, um, and just tried as best I could. That clinical psychologist also taught me about the Patient Client Council in Northern Ireland, which is an outside body that audit um, GPs and hospitals to make sure you're getting adequate treatment. And if you're not able to advocate for yourself, they will advocate on your behalf. And he said, he made me log into my laptop on the call and he said, I want you to get ready to draft the email. And I just said to him, that's not in my nature. I'm not someone who complains or reports people. And he said, well, if you're not going to hit send today, I want you to ring your consultant secretary and I want you to tell them that you're about to hit send to see what happens. So I came off the phone with him, and it was the one and only time that my consultant secretary answered the phone. And I told her, I said, I need a second opinion. I've been advised to contact the Patient Client Council. I'm about to hit send. And she said, don't do it. Don't do it. Leave this with me. I'll come back to you today. Either way, I'll have an answer for you. And the very next day in the post, I received a letter which was referring me to another consultant for a second opinion. And it was someone who had much more expertise in the field, which I needed. And so that's when ties were broken with that consultant. And the next week I went to see my consultant, who is still my consultant to this day, is an absolutely amazing woman. Right from the very first day, she said, I'm going to advocate for you. We are going to get to the bottom of this. It might take us a long time, but I am going to fight for you because this is not quality of life. And actually, what happens is if you need surgery, we will even have that conversation with surgeons to say, I know you don't want to do it, but the patient's quality of life is what overrides everything. So we have to do what is right for them. And within 2 years, I had my surgery.
Wow.
Yeah.
So within 2 years, what time frame are we talking about now? Are we talking sort of 23? That be
Did I have,
2023?
did I have my surgery?
Yes.
So my surgery is actually 5 months today. I had my surgery on the 26th of
24,
January.
yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
The lead up to that was so I've had like several MRIs in the small bowel, in the large bowel. I've had things done called a proctogram, which is you go in for X-ray. They insert a paste into your rectum, which is like fake stool, to see what the muscles are doing. And they could tell then that there was no peristalsis at all in my large bowel, that nothing was working. I'd also been to like the ladies' wellness clinic for pelvic floor to check that all of my muscles were doing what they were. Everything from that point of view was great, was working normal, and it was more or less internally. And so every day, kind of for the last couple of years, I was irrigating. I was using a bowel irrigation, which is a pump, a big bag that holds 2 liters of water. So I would fill that with lukewarm water, place it on the bathroom floor. It was linked to a big catheter tube. a rubber catheter on the end, and that would be inserted into the rectum. You'd sit in the toilet, I would insert that into the rectum, and then I would use a hand pump, which would pump the water into the bowel and kind of fill it up, and then effectively get any waste to melt and come away. Um, a bit like your home colonic irrigation system. But with that, it was unsuccessful. And right from I had started to use that 2 years ago, it was evident. I would sit in the bathroom for an hour and a half and I would get clear water coming back out again. So I would pump in a litre or 2 litres, let it drain away, refill the bag, pump in another 2 litres, pump it in, let it drain away. And I could do that and I could pump in up to 12 litres. And actually, what happened in the end was the colorectal nurse said to me, "You're going to end up perforating your bowel from low down because nothing could get past a certain point." And so, where the pain had initially started on my left hand side, I knew there was a point there that nothing could get past because the blockage was so great. So I was using this bowel irrigation machine every day in life, which was taking an hour and a half out of my daily routine. So I just scheduled it in whenever I wanted. Sometimes I would do it in the morning, sometimes I would do it in the evening. If I was uncomfortable during the night, I would get up 4 or 5 o'clock in the middle of the night and just go in and try to irrigate to try and relieve something. Because that was unsuccessful, my gastroenterologist had also put me on to several types of bowel prep. So I use clean prep and I use movie prep, which are powdered sachets you make up in 2 or 3 litres of water before you would have a colonoscopy to make sure you're totally flushed out. And pretty much, if my husband was to drink that, within half an hour or an hour, he would be in the bathroom with chronic diarrhea, and he would come out saying, "Oh my goodness, I'm 4 stone lighter. I've lost everything. There's nothing left inside of me." That is not how it impacted me. I never lost anything. Nothing ever flushed out of me other than a wee tiny bit of water. And so the concentration wasn't enough in those liters that they moved me across to a thing called sodium picosulfate, which again, they only usually give you a spoonful, it's a teaspoonful of to take. Um, it, Off book for a GP, they can't prescribe any more than 5 mils, and you're only allowed to be on it for 3 days. I was drinking 120 mils every day to try and get somewhere. And so that was the only thing that would help me relieve a little bit, but it would also take me 3 days for it to go through my system. So my life pretty much looked like it was scheduled. If I wanted to go to my mum's on a Thursday, I had to take my bowel prep on a Sunday. So I would be at home Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Into Wednesday, I would be clear because if I got into the car to drive, the chances are I could pass out at the steering wheel. That was just a daily thing where I would have to ring my husband or my daughters and say, "Talk to me. I'm in the car. The pain has came on me. I don't want to pass out." And that became an occurrence that was more and more because my body just couldn't handle the bowel prep. And then I ended up admitted to hospital last September. The pain was so bad we couldn't manage it at home, and I was admitted at that stage, and my surgeon said, "I want to go in and I want to look at you laparoscopically because if I go in and I do an ileostomy stoma surgery right now, and you waken up and you still have the same pain, what are we supposed to do?" So in his head, he thought, is there a possibility that I maybe had endometriosis, even though I had a hysterectomy? He thought, has there been tissue left in there where that has grown and that's what's causing your pain around the bowel? Because he couldn't understand why my bowel would cause so much pain. He said, bowels don't cause pain. I just said, I'm telling you, my bowel is causing me pain. And he went in laparoscopically then the beginning of October, and he had a look and he said, "Your bowel looks healthy on the outside. Apart from I can see it's totally redundant. There's no muscle. It's effectively dead tissue. It's not doing anything, and you will need an ileostomy surgery." Um, and so he discharged me to see me back in 3 months to then decide. That was the end of October, but going into the start of January, Um, I had reported to A&E 3 times at the start of January with the pain again. It had just gotten so bad. I'd been on the phone with my consultant and she had spoken with the surgeon, and he had said that surgery was end stage, and her opinion was we are now end stage. I would have taken bowel prep, gotten into bed, and then felt the urge to sit on the toilet, even though I couldn't pass anything. It was the most comfortable place to be. And I would maybe be walking from my side of the bed to the ensuite, and I would shout to my husband Adam and say, "You need to come in here because I'm going to faint. I'm going to pass out. Like, just talk to me." And I can remember coming round, and he would be holding a flannel on my forehead. I would be propped up against the wall, soaking in sweat, and he would just be trying to talk to me to keep me alert. And then quite a few times I ended up shouting instructions at him to get the irrigation machine out, get it together. He had never had to put the machine together, he'd never had to use it on me before, but we were at a different level now of this needs done. I couldn't do it for myself. So I was shouting instructions to assemble the machine together. And then he actually had to insert the catheter. He had to start pumping the water into me because I was in and out of consciousness. And not a lot of husbands would do that for their wives. You know, that's even though we're intimate, I still felt vulnerable. I felt exposed of like my husband shouldn't have to do this for me. And so he'd have gotten me back into bed, and 3 hours would have passed where we'd been in the bathroom and trying to relieve something, you know. And I just said to my consultant, "This is awful. Like, my husband shouldn't have to do this." And she said, "You know, you're right. Your husband doesn't have to do this." You know, a lot of men would have just rang an ambulance and said, "You need to come and deal with this. I can't do this." And it had also gotten to the stage where I was having to um, use lubricants and put on gloves and do manual evacuation myself to try and relieve some of the pressure when my body couldn't pass still. And so then she said, "No, we need to go back to the surgeon. The surgeon needs to do something." So the last time that I was admitted to hospital was in and around the 14th of January this year. And when I was in hospital, I was actually having, I was due an outpatient's appointment with my surgeon. And on that day, we had a 45-minute appointment. And it was a rather heated appointment because my husband was saying, "You need to do something. This cannot go on." And the difficulty was the surgeon was the same age as myself and my husband. And he kept saying, I wouldn't want this for my wife. This is going to impact your quality of life. You know, this is going to change things forever. And my husband was saying, "Yep, it is going to change things forever. And she's not your wife. She's my wife. And if you were living on a day to day basis like this, you would want something done." And so that day he decided that we had three options. They were to fully remove the bowel, but if he did and my pain was still there, we couldn't put the bowel back. And the other thing was to do a colostomy. And because the issue was in my large bowel, doing a colostomy for me wouldn't do anything because the stool still couldn't pass through my large bowel, which is where the colostomy would be formed. So the only other option then was for him to do a loop ileostomy up in the small bowel, where my food would go into my stomach and then pass into the stoma in my small bowel kind of immediately, and no waste would be going through it. And if it wasn't successful, then it could be reversed. Um, that day, that appointment was on the 20th of January. He told me that day he would be bringing me in the first week in February to do the surgery. But the very next day, I had a call from the hospital asking me was I free the following Friday. And I said yes, got excited, thought I was going in for my pre op assessment. But it turns out I was actually being booked in for my surgery. So my surgery went ahead 6 days later. And on the morning of surgery, I was high as a kite on morphine because of my pain levels. And the very next day, the Saturday afterwards, I was on an awful lot less medication after surgery because I had no pain in my bowel whatsoever. And I've not had any pain in my bowel at all since surgery.
That's fantastic.
Mhm.
With the surgery itself, you said it was going to be a lot later, and then it came a lot sooner. Was that a better feeling? Did you have less time to get nervous, or did you think, "Oh, it's all come at once"?
I was a little excited because it came sooner. It worked out really well. I mean, 3 weeks, it still was pretty soon to have a 3 week window of having it done the start of February. But because of where the pain had gotten to, I mean, if we were to go back 2 years before surgery, and the surgeon had said to me then, I'm bringing you in next week, or I'm bringing you in a few weeks' time, we're going to do this surgery, I would have been probably begging them to say, no, can we not try something else first? But because my journey had been almost 4 years of agonizing pain, and I'd had everything done, and I'd been through the motions of all the treatments, and I wasn't getting anywhere, I was at my wit's end. I was ready for it because my quality of life basically didn't exist. Like, I hadn't been out for a meal in nearly 4 years. I couldn't go and socialize in friends' houses because of the pain I was in. Um, like I said, I couldn't just randomly decide to take the dog out for a walk. I'd be on the beach, I'd be doubled over in pain, screaming. I was embarrassed. I was having to sit in a towel to, go out in the car anywhere. I couldn't just nip to Tesco or Asda to get something, food, groceries. Those were all things that people take for granted and I couldn't do. And so I knew that my quality of life would be so much better. And in that 6 day window, I had um I had a telephone appointment with somebody from the Ileostomy Association, a buddy, asking me how I was mentally, in a position for it. They were someone who'd been through it, and it was a really helpful chat. I also had an appointment with my stoma nurses, who are absolutely incredible. They're a great team of ladies, and they provided me with a range, a variety of stoma bags. They even gave me a little fake stoma with double-sided tape to fix onto my abdomen, to try, to try the bags, to sleep with the bags. And you could put little beads inside the bag and add a little bit of water, which imitated having stool in the stoma bag, to try out for a few days. Now, it was that appointment was on the Tuesday and my surgery was on the Friday. I was also in Liverpool for my daughter's graduation at uni on the Thursday. Uh, and it was just a busy week of going to bed, trying this new stoma bag, waking up, putting on a new stoma bag. But it also helped my husband and my youngest daughter, who was at home, where they were saying, okay, mum, can I put this bag on for you? Can I do the routine? Because if you're really sick afterwards, we're going to have to be hands on. And they also were mentally preparing themselves for it. So the other side of that was, for the last 6 months to a year, I've been tuning in and listening to podcasts every day of people with bowel conditions. I've been connecting, because I share my journey on social media. I've been connecting with so many more people. And, the good thing about people who do share their journeys on social media, they're all positive. They're building each other up, they're paying it forward. And the bowel community are a really tight knit, close community. They have each other's backs, they are supportive, because they've gone through it themselves, and they feel you. You can relate to these people. So that's kind of the headspace I threw myself into. And actually, what was happening was I was mentally preparing myself for what one day would come. In my head, I knew I would have to have surgery at some stage. I just didn't know when, but it helped definitely prepare me for it. So if I was to do things again, I would do it exactly the same way. I know from interviewing people on my own podcast, there are a lot of people out there that don't get that experience. They don't get 6 days notice. They don't get 3 weeks notice. It's an emergency. They don't know what a stoma is, and I really, really feel for them, because for me, yeah, elective surgery, you might say, within 6 days, but I still had some plan on it. I got mentally prepared for it, where other people don't. And again, that's the beauty of being able to share your journey on social media, because those people will be tuning in, they will be watching, they will be listening as soon as they're in a position of having surgery, and they need to learn. And who better to learn from than somebody that's already started their journey? So, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And just on your point about your podcast as well. Obviously, I appear on it, or by the time this comes out, will have appeared on it.
Yeah.
And fantastic podcast, by the way. Why did you decide to start the podcast?
So, like I said, Tom, I've been sharing my journey on social media for the last 2.5 years. My business is an online wellness coach. So, I mentor in fitness, nutrition, and mindset. And I have been sharing my journey publicly, turning up every day on pretty much Facebook and Instagram. post-surgery, I mean, I've had TikTok for I think 3 or 4 years, but I never actively used it. And once surgery was happening, I thought, right, I'll start to share more on TikTok. And I don't know what's happened. It's just kind of exploded, and there's so many more people out there. I think they hide on TikTok. They don't necessarily use their accounts, but they follow other people. So it's a good way to have eyes on. So with sharing my kind of online business point of view or my daily life, I at first was kind of showing up Monday to Friday, showing, I was up first thing in the morning. My daily routine was to fill my own cup, or it still is, to fill my own cup before I pour into anyone else's. So I do a lot of volunteer work in the community, and investing in me and keeping myself in a really positive mental headspace is important. And for me, that is exercise at the start of my day. Not doing something that I hate, but finding programs that I love. And it really boosts me, and my days are a lot more productive whenever I get that done at the start of the day. So I would turn up, I would show that, and then I would just showcase other parts of my life throughout the day. But at the weekends, I was disappearing. And I was disappearing because Friday afternoon would come and I would have to do bowel prep. And then I was off the grid for 3 days, and then back on Monday morning, life was fine. And I began to feel like I was a fraud. I wasn't being my real authentic self. So I decided, do you know what? Actually, my followers might really love to know what is going on with me. And what if there's someone else out there who is like me and needs help and needs to know that they're not alone? So I started to share that, and that really built my kind of following up, because at the time I think I had 50 followers or something on each platform. And people really started to tune in and follow along. And then I just shared about going into hospital and things. And from I kind of knew I was September, October time in hospital, people really started to reach out to me in DMs and private messages and things. And I really knew I was impacting so many people. I then shared my my story 5 weeks post surgery, I think, on another podcast, the Beautiful Vibe podcast, ran by Leanne Hayden. She's a fabulous lady. Leanne and I've been on socials together for I think a couple of years now. We were kind of in similar businesses and things, had a lot of things in common, and we've been connecting. And so it was her podcast that I was listening to every single day. I just filled myself with that. As a result of her podcast, that I connected with 2 other people, with slow colon transit in Alaska and Florida. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I'm not alone. I can't find someone in Northern Ireland, but I found someone else in the world. And I connected with those people. And then, whenever I was in hospital, I connected with another girl, Alicia, who now runs a Northern Ireland Facebook group with me. So that was the first thing. I knew that I was impacting people, and I wanted to have something local in Northern Ireland. And 5 weeks post surgery, I decided to set up. I didn't want a WhatsApp group because I think things get lost in a WhatsApp and people can be overwhelmed with notifications and things. And the idea was to set up a private Facebook group. So I set up Ostomates NI, for people living in Northern Ireland who have bowel conditions, not just stomas, but any bowel condition. And that private Facebook group wasn't just for those people with those issues, it was for their loved ones, or partners or carers, somewhere safe that they could ask questions. And so that group now almost has 300 members in it. It's thriving, people just connect in there, and we've had a couple of local meetups, which is good. And I think the people of Northern Ireland are just, they like to do community, they like to get together in person. But when I started to kind of publicize that, I had so many people from around the globe, because I have clients in the States and Canada. They would contact me and say, why can't this be, a global group? I'm like, because it's for local meetups in Northern Ireland. So I also run a private like ladies Facebook group, and there are some people with stomas from the States and everything that kind of interact with each other in that group, which is amazing. But that's just like a daily building each other up, women building each other up day in, day out. But there was still this kind of lack and need for something. And because I was connecting with so many people on socials who had gone through surgery, had amazing stories, some of them don't share their stories on social media. And I just thought that your story needs to be heard. Like everybody has a voice, and your story is going to impact someone. And I knew that there was a need for a podcast, and I guess it was that if I had listened to the little voice in my head, I never would have taken the step. I never would have done it. And I was only 6 weeks post surgery, and I found out I had an infection which had been in my body prior to surgery. And to this day, I'm still on antibiotics. I've got another month to do of antibiotics. Um, it's nasty. It doesn't want to leave the body. And at first, whenever it got really bad, I was in bed a lot of the time. Fatigue had hit again. I'd been 6 weeks post surgery. I was feeling amazing, and all of a sudden, I got very violently sick. I was running a fever. I couldn't get out of bed. And once we kind of managed it and started to take the antibiotics, I then had to listen to my body and kind of go back to day one of being in bed, taking things easy. And I just said to myself, what am I going to do? And that's when I kind of started to plan and prep and do all of the legal side of things of a podcast and the graphics and put everything together myself in my sick bed. And then just decided, right, okay, I'm going to go for it. And I want to say you're episode 11, I think I'm right, which is launching on Friday morning. So one podcast a week. And yeah, there's so many people out there that I connect with on a day-to-day basis, and their stories just need to be shared and be heard. So no better place to air it than on Spotify and Apple and YouTube, etc. Yeah, that's great.
Fantastic. And what an excellent plug for the podcast, because my next question was where can people find you? So that's a great segue. So obviously the podcast, Bowel Chronicles podcast,
Yeah,
on YouTube, Spotify,
on Apple.
and Apple Podcasts. Where else can people find you?
People can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok under Nicky Kilpatrick Coach. Yeah, if you find me on any of those platforms, there's always links in my bios, which will take you directly to the podcast, and anything else that I do is all on there.
Brilliant. Well, from me, thank you ever so much for joining me. Best of luck with the podcast, the coaching, and everything else. So thank you ever so much, Nikki.
Thank you so much, Tom, for having me here. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's great to collab with you. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.